All right, so today's topic is human impact on climate. A lot of this should be a review because it's things that we've already talked about earlier in the semester, okay? So this is an actual review slide because we've talked about the greenhouse effect before. Who remembers what the greenhouse effect is? What does the greenhouse do? It traps gases. Which one? Carbon dioxide, that's right. Okay, so that's what happens in the atmosphere. So an actual greenhouse has what? Plants and stuff, right? And so the sun shines into the greenhouse, and there are what are known as infrared rays that come in. They bounce and they trap heat in the greenhouse. Okay, so the heat stays in. So if you were to walk into a greenhouse, it is typically very warm. Okay, that same thing happens in our atmosphere with greenhouse gases with things like carbon dioxide. Okay, so the Earth's average temperature is about 57 degrees Fahrenheit, but without the natural greenhouse effect, the average temperature would be more like -2. Okay, so the greenhouse effect keeps us warmer. So there are 4 greenhouse gases. The first is water vapor. We've seen water vapor when we talked about the water cycle. Okay, next is carbon dioxide. We did a lot of talking about carbon dioxide. This comes from things like burning fossil fuels, which can come from things like factories. Can also come from solid waste, trees, and wood products. Okay, next is methane. This can come from livestock, which we've talked about in the past, fossil fuels, also the decay of waste in landfills. And then the 4th greenhouse gas is nitrous oxide, and this comes from things like agriculture, industries, fossil fuels, and also solid waste. So climate change will threaten the health of many people. So global warming will increase human deaths, and it can come from things like heat stroke, increased flooding, malnutrition and starvation from disruption of the food supply, spread of tropical diseases to temperate regions, more insects, microbes, toxic molds, and fungus, increase in some forms of air pollution. There would be more O3, which is ozone, decreased amount of vital natural capital, increased number of environmental refugees, and also things like increased poverty. So this is an example of a drought. Okay, so it can bring things like droughts. This actually happened. Droughts and firestorms happened in Australia. They happened in the United States, Indonesia. Next are things like floods, which we've also seen here. They have also happened in Peru, Ecuador, Southern California. So some human activities also play a role, not some, a lot of human activities play a role. So the countries with the largest CO2 emissions are China, United States, and India. So up here are 10 indicators of human finger point on climate change. So shrinking the thermosphere, we talked about that a long, long time ago. Rising the tropopause, less oxygen in the air, 30 billion tons of CO2 per year. Nights warming faster than the days, More fossil fuel carbon in coral, more heat returning to Earth, more fossil fuel carbon in the air, cooling the stratosphere, and less heat escaping into space. And we have seen something very similar to this, but in a different diagram. Bless you. Something else we need to be familiar with is deforestation. And this is probably somewhat of a familiar term. This is when we clear forests on a massive scale. So when we do this, we're also taking away habitats and homes of animal life. So forests are cleared for lumber, paper products, agriculture, and urban sprawl. But like I said, it can have effects on the ecosystem, so it can have significant loss of habitat. So 70% of the land that animals and plants live in are forests. It also drives climate change. So forest soils are moist, but without tree cover, they will dry out. So it helps perpetrate the water cycle, and it also absorbs greenhouse gases. So up here is an example. They do this to clear land when they are building commercial areas or a new neighborhood. We've seen that happen a lot around here. So global warming, something we've already discussed. So global temperatures rise due to increases in the CO2 levels, and this can do things like causing the sea level to rise. Poor polar bear. So when sea levels are rising, 13% of the world's urban population lives near sea level. So many cities would actually be devastated by even relatively small increases in sea level because of how close they live to actual sea level. So areas of Florida would flood if the average sea level rises just by a meter. So when we talk about this, ice and snow are melting. And things that contribute to this are thermal expansion of the seawater. So as water molecules heat up, they expand and take up more space, which causes the sea levels to rise. Rising global temperatures, so things due to climate change and global warming. Melting of glaciers and ice caps. This adds tons of fresh water to the oceans. And a recent study actually said that the ocean will rise between 2.5 and 6.5 feet by the year 2100. So can the oceans actually save us? The oceans absorb large amounts of CO2. The problem is that the warmer the water is, the less CO2 it can hold. So CO2 levels increase ocean acidity. So there would be a big effect on the coral reefs because it dissolves the calcium carbonate on the reef. So some solutions. Why is global climate change hard to stop? First of all, it's global, okay? It's very long-term. Political reasons, uneven resources, and the impact to the economy and lifestyles that it changes. So we can do things like mitigation. Okay, we've seen this term a lot throughout the semester. This is the act of decreasing or reducing something. Okay, so things we can do, we can reduce greenhouse gases because a lot of those are due to humans. We can improve energy efficiency, renewable energy, reduce, reuse, recycle. We talked about this in the last unit. And we can know and reduce our carbon footprints, which you also all saw in the last unit, okay? Some of us have a lot larger carbon footprint than we actually think we do. Any questions?